Good to see you guys. This is a really special session of Ecosystem Engage, the Not So Daily Show. You've all seen the ones we've done with business leaders. You've seen the expert version with our analysts. This is the friend version. And friends of the business, people that we've spent, both Uli and myself, we've spent a lot of time working with over the years, learning a lot, and continuing to do so. And both Steve and Graeme, whom I'll introduce shortly, play a big role in terms of shaping many facets of ecosystem, whether it comes to picking the name, helping with how we spell it or misspell it, and also giving suggestions along the way as Uli and I have built up this business. So thank you, gentlemen. So with that, I'm going to introduce Graeme Muller, who's the CEO for NZTech. NZTech is the industry body that oversees the use of technology, the adoption, the growth, and the digitization of New Zealand across various industries. And within NZTech, Graeme, you've got 23 industry bodies for different industries.
Yeah, 23 tech associations in an alliance, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And works like clockwork, big support structure for the New Zealand ecosystem. And then we've got Steve Scott, who's the founder and CEO for arguably the best run events company I've come across, and I mean it. Very professionally run, and definitely the largest events company for B2B events in New Zealand. Conferenz, Bright Star, as some of you might know from their training brand, but a really, really good experience in terms of running conferences, events, and overall industry engagement. So welcome, Steve and Graeme. And then, of course, we've got my partner in crime, Ullrich Loeffler. Uli is our Chief Operating Officer. And, Uli's in Sydney at the moment, where he's got a little bit more freedom than the rest of us. But we thought it'd be a great opportunity to get a perspective on, what you guys are facing in the markets that you're in, and also just a perspective on your business, the industry, and what you see going forward. So thank you. Okay, can I ask you guys one question? What is the one thing that you're doing to stay sane?
To stay sane, I'm running.
Yeah, okay,
And
that's an easy one.
Running fit.
Yeah. And Steve is playing a rock concert in his driveway.
Little thing, let me light your chemicals, mama, I'm short and nice around. Oh, hard and now. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's right.
Hey, you're
getting creative with some friends. Yeah.
And before we get off, because this is a beer session, I just want to say cheers and stay well. And we wish everyone who's watching this good health and stay strong. So let me start off. I guess with you, Uli, first. You didn't think I was going to start with you, did you?
No, I didn't.
I like to mix it up. So you're in Australia, right? And we've had, I'm going to delve a little bit more deeper into New Zealand, because that's the focus of the session here at the moment. But being in Australia, you've been there now, Uli, for the last 2 months. And we do miss you in the office here. But since we're not going to the office, it doesn't really matter.
The one in the office, yeah.
But what's it like in Australia at the moment? Because things seem to have eased up there.
Yeah, Australia has actually been, so I was here before the restrictions or the lockdown came in. So, I was here for some business projects. So the first 3 weeks were pretty normal, going to work. Obviously, everything was a little bit quieter because people who could already decided to work from home. But since the restrictions came in, it hasn't been as tough because you would still be able to go out with a purpose. So you could go out shopping, exercising, which I think is the most important thing, and go doctor visits. So that's why it never felt like life came to a standstill. It just you feel a little bit more isolated. You're not having your social catch-ups, or all your social catch-ups are virtually, as we all experienced. So you just adapt your life, but at no point did it feel like, it wasn't bearable. It's still a lot more freedom than I think a lot of other places, had to offer.
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess that's the thing. And what, Steve, Graeme, what do you guys, what have you been going through? I mean, New Zealand's getting a lot of very positive reviews. I keep my fingers crossed. Let's not jinx it. Let's hope it continues on. And but what have you guys been facing for the last 1 month?
Well, it really just shut. The place shut. It was incredible. It was almost overnight. We got told on a what was it, on a Friday or a Monday or something. By the Wednesday, everyone was at home and the whole country stopped. You're allowed to go out for exercise. So going for my run, I could run down the middle of the road, wouldn't see a car all day. But then a couple of days ago, the levels changed, and it was like the cork came out of the bottle. Everyone's can go to work as long as they don't engage with people, if they're in those sort of jobs, and life's coming back. It's pretty amazing.
And yeah, I'd echo that. I mean, we obviously we saw things coming, and as a business, we had planned to essentially go into a self-imposed lockdown, close the office just before the country went into lockdown. But it was, an absolute abrupt halt, and so it was something that I think the whole country obviously had to go through all at once. Normal week, and then the next week within 48 hours have been introduced to the concept that the government had levels of alert levels. We launched into that at level 3, and then 48 hours later, level 4, and we were all at home. So there was a significant change for everyone all at once, and it was very, very strict. And but it was the right thing, and it seems to have worked so far. So it was quick. Yeah.
So
It's been amazing how everyone's adapted.
Sorry, Graeme?
Been amazing how quickly everyone adapted.
Yeah.
So if you told everyone in February that the entire country would be working from home, it would have been mass panic and nothing would have happened. But we've got 48 hours, and I was talking to someone from the government the other day, and they were literally asked by the ministers, "What's our capacity for working at home?" And they went, "What do you mean working at home? We can't do that." I said, "Well, we have to do it in 48 hours." And so the entire government employee base, and a lot of companies, every company that could, within 48 hours spun up. So you're looking at big tech firms were managing their entire dev teams, supporting government departments and major corporates with mission critical stuff, with their teams dispersed at home, sitting in little towns and villages around the country, doing massive tech projects. It was amazing.
Yeah, but look, I mean, the impact of that, and I've said this before, that what we're going through at the moment, I mean, there's a lot of talk in the business community about an economic crisis, right? Yes, there is an economic fallout, but that's really a fallout of the humanitarian crisis foremost, right? So that, I mean, just the impact on people, right? So it's been very quick decision-making top down, and which is needed sometimes. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with it. I think it was absolutely needed. But then, you guys are both leading teams and would have had a huge impact, and then just conveying that to the teams, and then how have you kept the whole morale up and keeping the teams engaged and motivated?
Well, I think from my perspective, the thing that really worked right at the beginning was this immediate introduction of this alert level system, 1 to 4. Which was immediately published. At each level, it was relatively clear what you could and couldn't do. It was introduced, as we say, within 48 hours of all being closed down. So there was that concept that I think helped everyone, just as a population, but obviously with workplaces as well. You could immediately see, for us as an events company, operations at levels, 2, 3, 4, were impossible. So immediately, that was something that all employees obviously immediately understood. I think the other thing that they introduced right at the beginning, which also made it really, really clear, is this concept of bubbles. You've probably heard, I don't know if that's a New Zealand-centric thing or not, but that's all we talk about is bubbles. And by that, we mean your immediate contact group. And we're all called upon to, have very, very small bubbles of people, pretty much your household, or maybe a dependent elder or something who might be living apart. And, a lot of focus has been about protecting that bubble. And it's only this week where, that's been able to be relaxed a little bit so that you can interact a little bit more with some other people. But that again was a concept that immediately made sense to the workplace. It made sense, and it would be useful going forward, I think, in managing workplaces and how they open up, and the concepts that you're going to have to manage around social distancing, and how businesses and how industries and how whole business efforts can operate. So those two concepts that they introduced right at the start, I think, set up a fantastic framework for everyone to be on board. Everyone was on the bus pretty much right from the start. It made a huge difference. Would you agree, Graeme?
Yeah, I'd say there's a couple of other things that were introduced at the same time in the language. They launched a concept, Unite Against COVID, in a website, and that was the tagline.
Yeah.
So it was immediately like a war footing, and our entire country was uniting to do stuff, and we had to basically forego privileges to save each other. So that kind of concept. And the other one that they launched at the same time was Be Kind. So it's a very Jacinda Ardern Labour Party sort of approach, but it was appropriate. And a lot of people were stressed, and it was a big change. And the message was constantly, everyone was talking about being kind. So in the work practice, what that meant was every time we start a Zoom meeting, by default, we have a conversation with people. How's your bubble? What's it like in your bubble today? How are you feeling? How are things going? And your first 10 to 15 minutes of an hour meeting, engaging on a personal, empathetic level before we get into it. And there was no rules around that. No one said to do that, but it was just these common sort of frameworks that the government put out, which sort of encouraged and enabled it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And look, I have to say, for the benefit of all the people viewing this video, Ecosystem is a very unbiased analyst firm. The only time we're going to not be able to follow that rule is we've got 4 Kiwis on the call, and we may be a bit biased towards New Zealand. So that's a given. But I did want to say, talking about these terminologies, I came up with one today. Really, I did. Just before our stand-up call, Uli, I was talking to Chris, and I said, because Chris, who's our head of marketing and director for communities, just had a baby in this period. So I was telling him, I said, well, you had baby boomers, and now Kate, his son, is a baby zoomer. That's probably what they're going to be called, because everyone's on. That's what they're going to see from the time they're born. He's been on a few of our Zoom calls as well. But just, I think I did want to add and emphasize that I think what New Zealand did from a business response perspective and an overall response, I think the lockdown at the right time, but then, lots of governments locked down. But I think what I saw in New Zealand sitting thousands of miles away was in our second week of New Zealand's, probably the first case in New Zealand, there was a website. Graeme, you referred to it, covid.gov.nz. So that it's a government website, so you can go to it. It's legit. Second, it wasn't just about the healthcare issues around COVID. It was the medical issues. It was around everything to do with COVID. Everything from, how do you seek medical treatment? How do you get support for your business? How do you get employment support? Even a counseling helpline. If you're concerned or stressed, like you said, lots of people were stressed, Graeme, you could there's a hotline number you could call in the second week, right? And then I learned first from Uli. Of course, I read about it. I learned from Uli when he spoke with you, Steve, in that same week. And then you and I had a catch up as well. And we saw how quickly the government responded with the whole stimulus. And right or wrong, I mean, it's never going to be perfect, but what was really admirable was the fact that it got out there and it was delivered immediately. So businesses, every business got what they needed straight away. Yes, there might have been some cases where it might not have been legit, but they probably took the approach, which has always been the approach in New Zealand. Common sense prevails over everything else. So let's get the money out there so that you can have continuity, and then we'll deal with issues later because you'll have more time to deal with it. Was that your experience, Steve? I mean, how did you feel that whole process went?
Yeah, so absolutely. We closed our office on the 23rd of March. We were at that point, we'd made some restructuring decisions already. We'd gone through that process, the 23rd. We were pretty much ready to implement those changes, which included some redundancies, and also other, big things, bringing all staff on board with the concept of a 20% salary sacrifice, and all of this. We need to all try and work this together so that we can preserve jobs, etc. The wages subsidy had been around for around 10 days, I think, probably at that point. But when it was first introduced, there was a $100,000 cap, regardless of the size of the business. And I think they realised very immediately that what they'd probably set up was something maybe targeted at the smaller business sector, but there would be massive, issues with the medium-sized businesses and the large businesses. And so, literally the day that we were going to implement our redundancy process, the cap was removed, and we spent 24 hours just trying to do some numbers. The wages subsidy had some preconditions. You had to prove that or indicate that your business was suffering and revenues were reduced by 30%, and you had to commit to retaining the employees on your payroll, or use your best endeavours to retain them on your payroll for the period of the subsidy, which was 12 weeks. To at least 80% capacity. So in our case, we easily qualified because, well, our business, we're an events business. Revenue dropped to zero, and we'd already implemented the other condition. So we put in an application, and it was a sizable application. The money was in our bank account 25 hours later. It was astounding, and so
amazing. That
provided us comfort. So there is obviously not, they put aside the fact that they will at some point need to and want to ensure that, those applications have gone through a due process and that they were rightfully awarded, and will follow it if they feel that they weren't. But they did the right thing from a business's perspective, which is move the red tape right across to the side, get the relief out there, and it wasn't. And the money was the whole claim immediately. It wasn't tell us at what time you want payments and does it match your payroll, outgoings, etc. It was right. Tell us the amount that you need, and bam, it's there. And obviously, for large organisations, it was millions and millions and millions of dollars. So it was extremely effective, comforting, a temporary measure, but certainly, I think a very, very smart move from the business, from the government, and just providing basically a waiting room for companies to shelter inside, because obviously all of that happened at a time where we don't know what was going to happen in the next 6 to 12 weeks, and of course we're still finding that out, but it was a smart move. Yeah, fantastic, great experience. I was very, very impressed.
Yeah, I can just reiterate that they put the simplicity and the tech first. and they're going through it at a typical government pace, and they've found 12 fraudulent cases so far. But they basically gave you a one-page form to fill in, and you filled it in with a few IRD numbers, tax numbers, and a disclosure that you agreed to something. You click submit. They texted you to say that it received it. For our organisations, within 6 hours, I got another text back saying the money's in your bank, and so it was all automated. Obviously, at lower levels, they did it faster, and then they're just slowly doing the red tape stuff later and checking up on it. And we've seen that not just in how they've operated that particular instance, but in some of the health elements and some of the software and things that they've had to stand up. They've done projects which would have taken 3 years in 3 weeks.
Yeah. And I think, just to add, I think that's one of the key differences that to the system that Australia, I think actually Australia, the support program that the government came up is pretty good as well, with their JobKeeper or Job Seeker program. But essentially it's now end of April, or tomorrow is the 1st of May, and actually no money has been processed yet. So they're still working through the application scheme, and it will be back to the start of the lockdown, but no company will receive money in May, and I think some companies it will just be too late by then. Because bridging 1 month to 6 weeks is a long time if you've got zero revenue coming in or sharply reduced revenue coming in.
Yeah,
and I think New Zealand is really fortunate in that way, and that we've got a very, very simple model of government. We don't have a federal state system. So we only have a one level of government. It's just the central government decision making. So the decision making lines and responsibilities are very, very short and clear. And obviously, unlike lots of governments, including this one, prior to this, once you make a decision to move all of the obstacles out of the way, a government can fund something extraordinarily quickly. And make it work along the way. So, and they've obviously, they're obviously building the rules and building the checks and the balances as they go. They're rightfully there, but they're doing it first. And so, I think that is the other factor that makes New Zealand, it's not unique, but it makes it very, very easy.
Yeah. But you know what? It validates one thing, that for the last decade or so, New Zealand's been consistently ranked number 1 in ease of business. I think the last 1 month has shown us why, right? And the fact that the example that Lee gave, I think Australia's programs are pretty good as well, from what you read. But the fact that people are still unclear on how to get the rebates, whether you're employed or self-employed and so on, and the fact that the cash hasn't come in yet, we know that cash flow is the most important part of the business, right? And I mean, even for us, we, for the last 2 months, one of the things that we've implemented is a 90-day rolling plan and cash flow planning. All our financial planning, all the fancy investor charts and all those things are kind of gone out of the window, except I did have one for the board meeting last week, but we kept it fairly basic. It's all now, what Uli and I look at is just, we look at our financials down to cash flow, right? How much cash in, how much cash out, because that's the only way you can plan, right? So for businesses that got in that cash infusion, and Steve, thank you for being that open and candid, but you're a very established brand in New Zealand. You're an established business with a very long-term team. Your team's been with you. Most of the people have been around for decades, and they understand and they empathize equally with the business. They have an emotional attachment. But Graeme, what about the hundreds of smaller tech companies in New Zealand, the startups? And there's so much startup activity in New Zealand. How have they been coping through this process?
Yeah, it's been challenging. There's been a misconception, really, that the tech sector is the beneficiary of this crisis, in that we're all working from home, using a lot more digital product. But we've been calling up our 1,500 plus odd members, having chats with them all, and getting a comparison of which ones are doing well and which ones aren't. The startups they're all small companies that have qualified for the wage subsidy. And the wage subsidy I read today, 188,000 sole traders have applied for the wage subsidy, right up to companies like Air New Zealand and those sort of really large organisations. The real issue for the startups and those sort of growth companies has been access to capital.
Yeah.
A lot of them, and I'm sure you can empathise with this, a lot of their investors have frozen everything because of the risk across their portfolios, and that creates cash flow issues. The digital companies providing services, the smaller ones providing sort of digital services, have been going well, but they've already started seeing their customers delaying their payments, so they're starting to suffer from cash flow as well. And even the big firms, firms like Datacom with 3,500 staff, are doing a lot of work, going gangbusters, but all of their project work stopped. So all the big firms, the banks, the government departments, slammed the anchors on future projects, and they said, we'll just put it all on hold. So I've heard that's happened in construction as well, and in the construction sector. So that everyone who was going to build a building is just going, whoa, hang on a minute, don't know what the future holds, so I'll stop. And so that whole roll-on effect right through the economy is quite tough. I mean, that's the beauty of the government's wage subsidy thing, is it's reaching everyone. But the thing that the talk now is not about getting. The other thing the government talked about was the response, and then the recovery, and then the rebuild. So We've moved out of the response mode, we've moved into the recovery mode, and then we've just started to drop the term rebuild or reboot the economy. We've just started to introduce this conversation about actually transforming. We're actually starting working with the government on a digital transformation roadmap. So seeing if there's an opportunity here rather than a problem, where we go, if we're going to invest in these companies and help them get going, how do we make them more digital? How do we help them trade more internationally? How do we improve their productivity? So trying to see that silver lining out of the cloud, and that will definitely help the tech sector if that sort of concept beds down well.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, I think, you talked about the 3 stages, and in terms of that whole planning around the recovery. I mean, how much emphasis do you think government should be putting at the moment on critical digital transformation programs, right? I mean, if you talk about smart cities in the earlier days, 3 months ago, people would have talked about smart street lamps and stuff like that. It's not important anymore. What's important is things like, how do you provide food, health, and education? These 3 things to sustain just the citizens, right? So New Zealand's an agrarian economy. I mean, you'd imagine that there should be a lot more going into food sustainability, and that involves, sorting out the supply chains and putting more emphasis on using technology for agriculture, and remote care, e-learning, remote learning. I mean, is this becoming top of the agenda for the government at the moment, do you think?
Well, we were just doing a bunch of that stuff before COVID arrived. So the New Zealand government had decided it wanted to copy Singapore, and it liked the industry transformation maps. The government had restructured its whole economic development policy around industry transformation, and they had just started work on forestry, food and beverage, digital, and agriculture. And so what's happened is agriculture has become agri-tech. So the agricultural transformation plan is now the agri-tech plan, agri-tech transformation plan. And the view is to getting more digital technology into the production sector for food and fibre, and then helping those firms that are providing that technology also export that technology. So that's as we start to move into the recovery stage, the economic development side of the government has already pulled that straight back on top of the pile. And the agriculture, the food and fibre sector in New Zealand is the one that is sustaining the economy. Yeah. So tourism was the biggest export, it disappeared overnight. So food and fibre exports become critical. And so then how do we maximise them? How do we get more productivity out of the land? How do we get more product overseas, etc.? Big focus. Likewise with health, obviously, they were in the response mode, but now they look in recovery. They go, is this an opportunity? We've just boosted up our ICU capacity. Is there an opportunity to actually continue this momentum and keep bedding down better technology. When we look at contact tracing, do we use the standards we might need to put in place for that broader so that we can improve the standards across health sector, etc. So yeah, the digitalization view is being applied across these sectors as they're looked at in terms of how do we get them going again.
Yeah. Sorry, Lee.
No, I was just interested as well. I for Steve's perspective, obviously, because your industry has obviously been one of the hardest hit with tourism and hospitality as well. How have you? I saw a few of your virtual events, so actually event virtualization series are coming out. What has been your experience in your kind of transformation over the last 4 to 6 weeks? Because I think every business, whether you're an events business or a traditional business, is kind of transforming different activities from physical to virtual at the moment, and a lot of companies I think trying out, but some things work, some don't work. So what has been your learning or your kind of experience?
Yes, absolutely. The events business, like the concert business, tourism business, is in a stop, unlikely to start again until July, August, and then only for probably smaller events. And so, yes, we have looked really, really hard at what can we do in terms of, if delivering some of the events that we were on the cusp of delivering, and including, summits and awards programs and various expos. So how do we deliver those for those people? And so part of it is decided by the site and the full event. So we have pivoted a number of certainly large-scale events to digital summits, and we have also just introduced new concepts for us anyway, and our customers around sort of short, sharp, very knowledge information based virtual conferences, mini conferences, our sort of formats. So that's all sort of come alive in the last week into the market, and we shall see how they go. And the thing we're all waiting for, certainly in our sector, is when can we open the shop, and what will people's attitude be to coming into the shop, if it's a conference or it's an expo or it's a meeting. We don't know that yet. What will people's appetite be for attending a business meeting or a business conference or an expo? We will wait and see. We won't know that until July, August, really. But more importantly, I guess what it's done is it's really focused our efforts into a real introspective look about who we are and what we can mean to our customers. And so that has built progressed a lot of that was always on sort of the back burner. Oh, yes, we're getting around to it, we're moving along slowly. Brought it right into focus, like for a lot of organizations, and it's meaning that for us, we have really just going through a process where we're re-envisaging the value that we can bring to customers, and moving outside of the frameworks that we've always worked inside quite comfortably. And so, and that's going to iterate out into new products, new services, and probably, I think, deeper relationships with customers. So that's going to be the net benefit of all of this, that it's all happened and happening much, much faster and sooner than it would have otherwise. And therefore, I think we'll end up much stronger, and a much more complex, richer business, more meaningful for us and for our customers.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. I mean, this kind of like, let's say, forced innovation, because you've got to try something new because the old business just don't work anymore. So my routine at the moment is I go out for a run in the mornings, and the first thing I do is listen to the BBC podcast from overnight, and at the end they always have like some example from around the world where something is done, or some new things what people try, and you hear so many examples where I think 12 different international film festivals are joined together now and did a partnership with YouTube to to basically hold one large international film festival, and different orchestras doing concerts with everyone at home. And so I think it's great to see this innovation and kind of also forward looking and said, look, let's not give up, let's not stick their head in the sand, but we've got to try something. It might fail, but at least we've given it a go. And I think that specifically for New Zealand, with the number 8 wire, it has always been a strength to just look, if it doesn't work, you've got to improvise, and you've got to do something new. So Graeme, have you seen? You're working with 500 plus companies, across all different sectors. You must have seen some great innovation coming out of the different pockets.
Yeah, it's it has been interesting because it's obviously affected different parts of the economy differently, as we've just talked about. But I think the real innovation has been coming from, I guess, the way we're operating as a society and the way companies are operating. And I think that it's less big sort of life-changing innovation, like someone invented a new automobile or flew to the moon or something. But I think it's going to have long-lasting effects for humanity, and certainly in New Zealand. Fortunately for us, 90-something% of the country had been laid with fast internet fibre over the last few years. So for most people, they've got good internet access to the home. But when you see how teaching's had to pivot to home, and businesses have had to pivot to home, and you're seeing how we have become really empathetic of the kids walking past the back of a meeting, or the cat jumping in front of the computer. The thing just goes on, or someone having to excuse themselves because something is happening in their personal life right there and then. If those sort of changes, which I feel like are going to be moved across sort of the changes in humanity, are going to hopefully stay and move across. And I think it takes something like 12 weeks to create a habit. So there's almost some benefit in going through these levels and still taking a while, working ourselves back into society. We'll keep some of the good stuff. We'll keep the ability to go, actually, everyone I talk to is going, well, I never knew I could work at home like this. It's so productive. These meetings are really effective, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we'll see a lot of organizations looking at the massive floor plates they have and going, wonder if we can co-share and create a co-working space in here with a few other people and make it more of a place for meetings rather than everyone sitting in holes and desks and stuff. And likewise with education, I think a lot of parents are now going, actually, kids don't have to be learning non-stop all the time. They're still learning as much, and their day is very fluid, and teachers are jumping on and off the internet. And I think teachers have surprised themselves in New Zealand as well, the ability to keep the teaching going, the classes going, and engage with the kids through tools which most of them wouldn't have gone near months ago.
Yeah. No, certainly seeing decades of societal change sort of compressed into weeks, right? And there'll be some patterns that'll become permanent, and there'll be the new way of doing things, and some things will probably go back to the way they were as well, right? But I think in all of this, there's obviously going to be a big role of technology in shaping that. We know that, that's for sure. That has become absolutely clear. Even if I think about Steve's business from a your training business, Steve, right? And at the moment, you're probably one of the leading training businesses in the South Pacific, and your revenue is based on the people you can cram into a room. But maybe in this whole corporate training space, your avenues might just shift completely, and might be, Australia, New Zealand, South Pacific, Asia Pacific, who knows? So I think it's also an opportunity, I think, from a technology standpoint for New Zealand, more than ever, to bridge that gap of that whole gap of tyranny of distance. May actually get a bit more sort of better for New Zealand in the long run. one of the hopes.
Yeah, I think that the experience that we're going through, and just to pick up on your baby Zoomers, term that you've coined, probably we've all gone from baby Zoomers to almost ninja Zoomers in a period of 6 weeks, and so it's really redefining how we can be together, and so. Yes, so we've been delivering training to clients via all sorts of technology, including Zoom, and they are wanting to ensure that they make use of this time and period to continue their staff's professional development. And the technology would have been seen as an obstacle earlier. Now they just understand that it's just, we can still move things forward. And I guess the other thing about this period is that my observation is that I've never had so many meetings. I've never had so many side get-togethers and stand-ups, and we're using that technology, and because of the distance, the enforced distance at the moment, we're actually communicating a heck of a lot. And that's made things a lot easier as well. So yeah, those things, those habits that Graeme's talking about, they're definitely going to carry on. And picking up on the earlier point, the feeling that the whole country and the whole world, we're all in this together, immediately brought people into that space where reaching for that collaboration and that partnership seemed like the right thing to do. And the easy thing to do, and I think maybe that's going to be a real hallmark going forward. I think that's redefined people's willingness to just do that, and so I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity in that because people are just going to be a lot more open to it.
Yeah.
And I've got one for you guys to pick up on Steve's point. At the moment, most countries have been looking inwards. They've been dealing with their own stuff, right? They've been in the response mode, let's call it. Now, the tendency is when you're looking at the recovery mode is you're getting your economy going, you're looking inwards again, and you're trying to get things going. But I remember just before, last year, the signing of the agreement between Singapore and New Zealand for increased trade relations. And then shortly after that, the agreement between Singapore, New Zealand and Chile around digital trade and services, and I wonder whether we can start to create some sort of reawakening of that. I'm sure there's people in government that are interested in it as soon as they get out of their response stuff, but there's no reason we shouldn't be having these sort of connections, inter-country connections, and starting the wheel spinning, because the old good to great analogy where it takes a while for the flywheel to spin. Quite a lot of conversations and brainstorming, getting things going, but there's still a huge amount of opportunity for trade in this digital world. Even if it's hard to fly around, New Zealand's becoming a domestic airline, right? And we're not expecting a lot of flights in and out of the country for months, if not years to come. Yeah. But there's still a lot you can do with digital trade.
Absolutely, I think that's a really good one to pick up. I mean, specifically for New Zealand and Singapore, that's definitely one to pick up. I know that there was an announcement last week. New Zealand and Singapore do work quite closely. There was something worked out around food sustainability for Singapore with the New Zealand government. So making sure that Singapore and New Zealand can partner in that. But there is just so much opportunity for digital trade, and these are the two economies that are actually quite ready for it. And that's been, one is the agreement, the other is the actual availability of the resources and the capability that both the nations have. Because one of the most important critical pieces of digital trade is going to be governance around data that flows around. And both New Zealand and Singapore have really strong governance norms and very comparable. And Graeme, you've been party to some of the discussions with the Singapore government as well in terms of how to build more around that. So I absolutely think that's something perhaps for NZTech, an opportunity to pick that up. I
was just thinking in terms of, about this, but I'll explain it. We have Tech Week coming up. So Tech Week is this a week of digital and technology and innovation events. And last year there was 564 of them in 38 towns. And there was a little bit of it was about helping kids get inspired into technology. A little bit of it was about helping build capability, but a lot of it was about showcasing tech, the greatest tech, and trying to connect those companies with international markets. But what we've discovered this year is that we're running it digitally this year, and we've already got some countries going, hey, this is a good way to have these sort of meetings and have events and showcase both directions. Creates that nice platform, and something I've got to put on the to-do list to pick up with you guys up in Singapore. NZTech up in Singapore has up in all of East Asia actually has gone on board as a strategic partner, and is looking at doing some activity to engage the markets they are in, like Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Singapore. But we should pick it up, further discussion, think about what would be some of the good groups to engage, use that platform in July to engage backwards and forwards and start that wheel spinning around some of the trade opportunities.
Absolutely. I mean, the Tech Week, I mean, it's a shame because as we know between ourselves that we had big plans for Tech Week ourselves, just following on from the big event that we did along with the Monetary Authority of Singapore last year in New Zealand in September as a build-up to the Singapore FinTech Festival. There was so much to be gained by doing that during your Tech Week, Graeme, because the Singapore FinTech Festival is a huge event. I mean, it's the world's largest FinTech platform, and interestingly run by the Monetary Authority of Singapore, who are not an events company, but obviously, they have a different agenda to bring collaboration. But in the same way, Tech Week in New Zealand that you've built in the last couple of years is equally big. It's just a bit more spread out because New Zealand's a lot bigger, and that would have been perfect for to leverage the capabilities of both in terms of the speakers, the collaboration, and the learnings. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and we are sort of continuing to explore what can be done to be part of Tech Week as well in some shape or form. I think it's a great story for New Zealand.
Yeah, I do think, especially as NZTech up in Singapore have decided to back it and really drive it, we should probably knock our heads together and think of what we can do, what Ecosystem NZTech can do to further bridge those trade relations. Yeah.
Well, I was looking forward to coming back home because, as you know, I'm a beat with the New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, and I was supposed to actually come back to New Zealand for Tech Week. Now I guess we'll just have to do it over a call. I'll dial in.
Yeah.
No, but look, gentlemen, it's been. I realize we've taken up a lot of time, and we'll continue on with our beers, but we'll probably sign off on this session. I just want to say thank you very much. It's just so much always to talk to you both about. It's also been amazing that so much is. Maybe it's because we don't have sport to watch anymore. I don't know, but we're all getting to catch up with our friends like this. When was the last time the four of us had a call? I think the last time the four of us were together was when we were all in Auckland last year. Yeah, and so I think there is going to be shifts in our behavior as well. But I just want to say thank you. Stay well, guys. And any last words of wisdom before we go?
No, just cheers to the future. Well done.
Cheers to good health, staying safe, staying well.
Till we meet again.
Thank you.
Till we meet again. And just for the record, I did coin the term baby zoomers. We have it on record now.
Actually, Amit, on that one, on BBC, they call them the Coronials.
No, the damn Brits, they're always trying to be so competitive. But on that note, we're going to sign off on this session. Thank you, everyone, and we'll continue on with our sessions on Ecosystem TV. There'll be a lot more friends and leaders from the industry joining us over the next coming weeks. But here I'm with Graeme Muller, CEO of NZTech, the industry body for technology in New Zealand, and Steve Scott, the founder and CEO of Conferenz and Brightstar, the largest events business in New Zealand. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining and enjoying the beers. and Ullrich Loeffler signing off with you, mate, my partner in crime and our Chief Operating Officer, who's at the moment currently stranded in Sydney. He seems pretty happy most of the time. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Amit.
Thank you.